Good afternoon, viewers. Belated Emancipation greetings and welcome to Futsal868 Corner Talks. My name is Geoffrey Edwards, series host and president of the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago. Futsal868 Corner Talks is an online meetup series where global sporting professionals share their experiences and perspectives on the fastest growing indoor sport in the world, futsal. In recent sessions, we expanded to discuss topics of social issues and their relation to sport. Our main objective is to sensitize and educate sport stakeholders on the sport of futsal and other pressing local, regional, and global issues. Gender represents a confounding social construction, with gender inequality being a complex, multifaceted, and multi-leveled phenomena that needs society in all its sectoral linkages, from the global to the local. Gender equality appears in human rights policies. Its opposite, gender inequality, is not merely an echo of political promises or rhetoric in the discourse of global sport for development and sport for all, but a reality in many parts of the world, such as sub-Saharan Africa. ISC President Thomas Bach said, "I firmly believe that sport is one of the most powerful platforms for promoting gender equality and empowering women and girls." In 2017, the Trinidad Tobago Olympic Committee launched Female is Future campaign, which seeks to provide equal opportunity for women and girls and equal chances to succeed at all levels of sport. The project also seeks to encourage and empower increased participation of women and girls in sport and physical activity, not only as athletes, but also coaches, sports medicine, and sports science providers. The second term in the discussion is inclusion. Inclusion in sport has been defined as increasing access to, participation within, and reducing exclusion from any arena that provides sport and physical activity. What a mouthful. Given this backdrop, our 16th episode of the Futsal868 Corner Talks will address part 2 of the topic, Gender Equality and Inclusion in Sport. Our team includes Miss Cleopatra Borel, 4-time Olympian and Valedictorian of the 2019 FIFA CIES Postgraduate Diploma in Sports Management. I would like to say good afternoon to Miss Cleopatra.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, good afternoon, Geoffrey.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
Up next, we have Miss Ytannia Wiggins, Director and Chair of the Women in Sports Commission at the Barbados Olympic Association. Good day, Ms. Wiggins.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, my former classmate, Shakera Selman, professional cricketer and former West Indies vice captain of the women's T20 cricket team. Good day, Shakera.
Hi, good day, Josh, and good day, everyone.
It fits nicely in terms of seeing you all on the grid. You know, last week we did it and it was like so amazing to be able to see you on the grid. I want to say welcome, ladies, and belated Emancipation greetings to you and all, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Futsal868 Corner Talks. We're going to go straight into it because we have limited time and plenty to discuss. It's interesting that I want to start with Ytannia, and I would like each of our panelists to follow suit thereafter, followed by Cleopatra, and then last but not least, Shakera, to define when you hear gender equality or inequality and inclusion, what do you get? What resonates with you from a professional and also personal, in your professional personal life, when you hear about gender equality or inequality and or inclusion?
Thanks for having me. And just to be honest, the semantics of it is becoming too much now. Not in a bad way, but we're thinking about gender equality, gender inequality, gender equity, inclusion. And certainly to me, all of them are kind of intrinsically linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 5, which is to achieve gender equality, and is vital to the realization really of human rights for all. So to me, the overall objective of gender equality and certainly inclusion in sports in a society, or it's really a society where men and women enjoy the same opportunities, rights, and obligations in all spheres of life.
So with that being said, I move on to Cleopatra, your definition based on your professional, personal life.
I would say gender equality for me really deals with inclusion and equal access. But also, I'd like to mention equal pay for women in terms of when they become, whether they are professional athletes or administrators.
Last but not least, Shakera.
Yeah, when I think of gender equality, I think of access, equal access, like Ytannia and Cleopatra said. I think about equal access, equal reward, irrespective of gender.
Thank you very much for that, ladies. And it's very interesting because for the sake of those who were not here with us last week, we put up this particular graphic when it comes to those two principles of sport in terms of gender equality and also inclusion. But there was also two aspects of it. We looked at equity and fairness, and I saw that that Cleopatra would have mentioned one of those. So we just, for the sake of the discussion and to make sure that we have a proper flow, even though it was mentioned last week, we just put this out there so persons can have a graphical representation of what it means in terms of the principles of sport. Ladies, this has been one of the social issues in recent times, especially during this whole COVID-19. But I really want to speak to it from a athlete's perspective. And I want to go straight back to Ytannia and ask her, how does the Women's in Sport Commission look at gender equality and inclusion in sports?
As I said earlier, certainly we have taken on the 2 mandates from the IOC where they have the gender equality review with the 25 recommendations, which pretty much sets out the key areas in which you work to have women in sport represented across all the facets of sports. And then we also work with the UN where, as I said, the SDG goal number 5, where we want to achieve gender equality. So for us at the Women's Sport Commission in Barbados, our main aim is to increase participation and certainly to go over the semantics and cover all spheres. You have inclusion, you have gender equity, you have gender equality, and you have fairness. So that's the main goal of the Women's Sport Commission here in Barbados.
It's the second time that you mentioned semantics. Such a very strong word. May I ask why?
Because I find sometimes in forums we're very bogged down about somebody saying they want gender equality, and then somebody say, no, let's have gender equity, and no, let's do inclusion. All the time we're not arguing or discussing, are we really working on making progress? So why spend the time thinking about equity, equality, and having these? Because if we were to talk about equality right now, your panel is not equal. We have 3 females and we have you. So we have to look at it on the flip side as well. Yeah. It's not only about holistically just having only women. If we're talking about equity, yes, we have the 3 females and yourself. If we're talking about equality, there should be 2 men and 2 women here.
Totally agree with that. But at the same point in time, I always want to hear my ladies speak, you know. Going to you, Cleopatra, a 4-time Olympian. And Ytannia keeps speaking about semantics. Let's look at the local front. Do you think that the question of gender equality is being addressed properly in Trinidad and Tobago and also the region?
Of course, the issue of gender equality is a complex one, because when we speak about gender equality in sport, we're kind of speaking about the dominance of the hyper-masculine male. And I think that there are regions where we need to look at for the less masculine male. So it's very complex. I think, however, that in the region, we need to look at development for all athletes, because we're at such a level whereby as they say, the rising tide should elevate all boats. And both our male and female athletes are experiencing a difficult time regionally. I believe that it's that much more difficult for female athletes, but the discussion really needs to be centered around elevating the system, the access, the resources that our athletes have. I come from the US system. I graduated from US University, where we have Title IX in gender equality, because there was a wide disparity between male and female athletes. And so steps were taken to bridge the gap, meaning female athletes were now permitted to have scholarships, etc., so that they can gain access to what was already there. But unfortunately, in our region, our resources are limited, and we need to ensure that they're available. We need to look more towards equality in terms of bringing on females, bringing on non-traditional males, and then looking at elevating the playing field for everybody.
I really are happy that you mentioned Title IX. For those who are watching on, it is very important that you go on and we do some research on Title IX. It was a very important piece of legislature in the US legal system. Shakera, before I ask your question, it is very disturbing to me as a sport administrator in Trinidad and Tobago that we consider in football, in the footballing landscape, that our marquee national team is the men's national football team. For us at Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago, we turned the corner when our girls represented Trinidad and Tobago very well at the Buenos Aires Youth Olympics in 2018. That was, again, a pivotal point for us as an association, for me personally as a sport administrator. With that backdrop, how do you, as an athlete, without being too political, feel as regards working in the cricketing landscape? When we talk about distribution, when we talk about equality, when we talk about inclusion, and compared to your male counterparts?
Well, trying not to be too political. I think Cricket West Indies is making progress. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources needed so that we can perhaps mirror what Australia is doing for their women, or England, or perhaps New Zealand. But they are making progress. I remember when I first started playing for West Indies, that was about 13 years ago. We had to cover the sponsor's logo because the DSL didn't sponsor the women, they just sponsored the men. Yeah. So we've come a long way. Now the DSL sponsors the entire Cricket West Indies setup. So things are happening. Girls have more access to camps. They're working on development programs, and there's finally an under 19 development program for women. So I'm very happy to see that. But like Cleopatra pointed out, we need to work on the resources made available so that we can have that gender equity, so that poor in the Caribbean can be raised to a level playing field.
I'm going to put up a graphic here a little historical graphic that's going to be interesting to our viewers and possibly even to our panelists. Given the fact that the English Premier League, one of the most viewed sporting products globally, just ended yesterday with the FA Cup, Arsenal winning, this really got me when I was doing some research. On the 5th of December 1921, the FA cited strong opinions about football's unsuitability for females. It called on clubs belonging to the association to refuse the use of their grounds for such matches. The ban changed the course of women's game forever. I want you all to look at the picture. That is the Dick Kerr Ladies FC, who attracted crowds of 53,000 spectators. 53,000 spectators in one match. And this came at a time during World War II, where the men went out to work. I shudder to think of where England would have been and the game of football would have been if those ladies will continue to play. With that being said, Cleopatra, what are your thoughts on that historical context? And how are we going to change the narrative now to be able to make a better future for our girls in the next 50 years?
It's admirable to see what those ladies have achieved, but I would be remiss not to mention the pose in which that photograph was taken.
Let's watch it again. Let's watch it again. Let's watch it again. I didn't even pay attention to it. Okay.
Yeah,
They're posed
Continue.
like showgirls.
because exactly, and they're posed like showgirls,
Yes.
and oftentimes in sport, women are hypersexualized, and you're not necessarily judged on your performances. And we've had situations whereby female athletes have been advised to sexy things up. And that is oftentimes related to how much professional female athletes are paid. And to me, when it comes to the issue of gender and sport and equality, I would like to live in a time where female athletes are judged based solely on their performances and not necessarily on their gender. We want to be athletes, we want to perform, we want to promote our sport. So even in my day, when it came to sponsors, etc., I've had my agent tell me, you know, yeah, you're in the top 10 in the world. Yeah, you're having a fantastic season, but no one wants to sponsor the women's shot put, you know? So I naively went in to my professional career thinking, okay, this is about performances. And while, yes, that's the case, but there's also these specific areas that female athletes have to address in terms of the way they look and the way they look doing their sport, whether it's feminine and attractive like the high jump in track and field, or, you know, other events compared to what I did as an athlete. So I just think as female athletes, we want to be respected for what we do. If cricket was played in little short shorts, then our ladies might have, you know, an easier chance getting access to funding, etc. And I think that the conversation with female athletes, I don't want to make it seem like I'm just here to talk about money, but female athletes have to survive, and we need to have, for women to take the chance to come into sport and to elevate the game to become sport doctors, physicians, coaches, etc. We have to be able to survive. So at the end of the day, it deals with access and with the money that will attract our young talent as well.
I totally agree with you, because my mother always says it's biblical. Money answers all things. As well as one of the barriers in terms of inclusion in sport is economic. With that being said, some writers say that a truly inclusive society needs fully inclusive sport. Shakera and then Ytannia, do you all agree?
Yeah, I agree. We started off by speaking about inclusion. There needs to be inclusion for all, I think, and not inclusion just to support your quota. I know sometimes we allocate roles to women simply to say, oh, we have 2 women on the board, but how active are they? What responsibilities have you given to them? So we need inclusivity on all fronts. You need to include them in decision making, include them in everything important. I think that's the only way forward.
Ytannia?
As Cleo said, it's complex in terms of inclusion, representation, and I know you spoke about sponsorship and remuneration, and that picture brought back a lot of memories, because for those who don't know, football is the genesis of where it started. And I understand not having equal sponsorship rights, and not necessarily money, but the availabilities of things. Something as simple as if you're sponsored uniforms. I was in the day when female uniforms were not female uniforms. You wore the male uniforms. And I think that spanned across all sports, not necessarily only football, but definitely Shakera knows this because she played and in cricket as well. You got the seconds of. So we have to think about policies that are directly targeted to increasing female participation. I know FIFA did it with allocated specific funds for females and females only. But if we're honest with ourselves in the placement of those funds, there were a time where those funds were not necessarily allocated to what they were supposed to be for. So when you have things and you show me pictures like that, it resonates with me because we always hear we can't sponsor females or we can't pay the same prize monies because they don't have the same spectatorship. But if spectatorship was that great back then and we had continued, would we be having this discussion today?
This graphic that I'm going to show now was showed at the last episode, but you all are speaking more to it, and I'm going to put it up again, and I really want to incite you all because I want that. We need it. We need to be able to have these discussions, and we need to be able to have it smiling, but have it intense. I'm a true believer of that. If it is we're playing hard, we're playing intense, or we're still enjoying what we do. This graphic clearly shows the disparity of wages between the U.S. women's national team and the men's U.S. national team. It is known the success stories of the U.S. national team on a global front and what it has done for the country. We are looking
women's national team, not the men's. The women's. Let's get that clear because the women's national team is what put U.S. football on the map, not the men.
That's so true.
Not the men.
Agreed. So with that graphic being shown, Ytannia, and I want each one of you all, starting with Ytannia, to tell us how do you suggest national governing bodies, national sporting organizations to correct this problem?
Which problem? There's so many, but
let's start with remuneration. Let's start with equal.
In terms of remuneration, you have to stop talking or continue talking, but you have to set policies. We can have as many conversations as we want, but if the West Indies Cricket Board, if CONCACAF, if our NOCs do not put policies in place that directly target funding for the development of women's sport, it will just always be a conversation on great shows like yours and not actual development on the ground.
Cleopatra, I'm going to throw you in the deep end here. You're my Yarrow girl. You have to swim. Come on. I throw you in there. You went up for a political seat.
Mm-hmm.
And I was happy to hear this. This is going to be a two-part question.
Okay.
One is a woman athlete, post-athlete career, your journey in there, as well as being a politician or a potential politician. If you were Minister of Sport, how would you have addressed gender equality and inclusion?
Well, for me, it would have started with grassroots participation. And I would reach out to the parents and young children, first and foremost, because we need to start somewhere. And I believe that that's a good point to start. We need in this country, and I'm suspecting in the region, we really need to get to the point where we're actively creating sport fans. And that may start with physical education, the club system, etc. We have to make sport attractive because there are so many other factors, so many other influences that are taking the attention of children who would play and become sport fans. That's how I started my career. I was playing. I realized I'm better than the other kids. And I realized that I am competitive. So it's a building process. And I think, once again, in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, we have to go after our boys and our girls. Moving forward, we have to look at policy which will support female athletes, For example, of course, I was the athlete willing to do anything to compete in my sport, but other females may not be willing to use a stadium without a clean or functional restroom. And that's a big thing for females, especially if you're coming out of secondary school. You may decide to participate or to not participate because of the facilities, because of the safety. Can I get home after training safely? Can I walk home? Is the training arena going to be safe? You understand? I mean, I recently had an incident at the National Stadium, and I'm an adult female, whereby a gentleman came and he decided to display himself. So what are we leaving for young women? We have to make things safer. We have to really make sport a safer environment for young women, for girls. And to be honest, I never competed at the Curved level because my parents wasn't sending me nowhere with no track team as a young girl. And now that I'm an adult and I look back on it and I see what happens, they were right. I can't blame them. I can't argue with it. As much as I wanted to do it, I would have loved to do it. We have to rectify these things. We have to make the sporting arena a safe place for young women. And some parts of our Caribbean culture comes into play in terms of that. And we really have to address those difficult questions. While I was in university, I was not permitted to date my coach. My coach couldn't date me. My coach couldn't. There was a very clearly defined line. And sometimes with our female athletes, with our young girls, those lines, we're not defining them. And we have to put in place these policies that are going to protect young people in general, because we know about the Jerry Sandusky incident. You understand? So as administrators of sport, we have to protect our athletes. And I understand that it is difficult at any level, but it's necessary. So I think that if I were, to become the Minister of Sport.
Speak it into being.
Let's speak it into being, Shakera. Let's call it. We really have to make a safe place for our athletes, male and female. And that's really something, sometimes we go to these stadiums and these different recreational grounds, and it's really not a safe place for our kids. And
it's interesting because last week we had Mr. Mark Mungle, and Ytannia, you would know Mark.
I know Mark as well.
Exactly. Who speaks as regards to safe space. In doing the team preparing the show last week and this week, we never thought about speaking about safe space when it comes to gender equality. And Mark put a whole different spin on it, to the point whereby, as a matter of fact, our guest last week from Red Bull, she's looking for a policy on that. And I love the fact that you speak to that, because not only a Trinidad and Tobago thing, a Barbados thing, a Caribbean thing, but it seems to be a global phenomenon in terms of creating safe spaces and looking at it from a gender equal position.
Absolutely.
And I'm really proud of the fact that you said that, because we are struggling with that. Guys, it's interesting because we have been speaking here for over 30 minutes without a break. And normally by now we have like 2 breaks. And this is totally amazing. So just permit me, please, just to take a quick break. You are watching Futsal868 Corner Talks with this beautiful trio of women. Yes, it's gender unequal, but I'm happy. I am a happy man. I'm a very happy man. So please follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Jerusalem, ikayalami ilonoloze uhambe nami zungangishilana dawo yami ayikholana buso wami awukholana
Jesse, catch me dancing, because I love that song. I love that song. I really do love that song. It was getting a little hot in here, and I like the heat, so we just take a little cool break, you know. But as we continue, welcome to Futsal868 Corner Talks. To those who are joining us, this is episode 16. I want to say thank you very much to our guests, Miss Cleopatra Borel, Miss Ytannia Wiggins, and Miss Shakera Selman for joining us. Before we break, we were speaking about safety in sport and also inclusion. From our research, there are two models of inclusion in sport that I would like to show to the audience as well as to our panelists. And to get your thoughts as regards that, and I'll turn to you, Shakera, when it is we return. The first one is an integration continuum for sport participation, noting that it becomes less restrictive when it is removed from adapted sport segregated to regular sport. The second one is known as the STEP model. And I'm sure that Ytannia and Cleopatra, all of my guests would know about these two models. For the sake of our viewers, we just put it up. Based on these two models, Shakera, what are your thoughts? And where, I know I say asking the same question over and over, but I'm trying to bridge theory and practical. I'm trying to bridge where we're supposed to be to where we are to where we need to be. What are your thoughts on those two models shown? And for the sake of yourself and others, I'll put it back up again. This is model 1, an integration continuum for sport participation. And model 2, the inclusion spectrum, created by Stevenson and Black in 2010. Shakera.
Yes, Jeff. If I could just go back, there was a point I wanted to make so badly before we took the break. So if I could just go back. So Cleopatra spoke about making sports safe, making a safe environment for all. But she also pointed out going into the communities, starting with the families and targeting the parents if we're going to get more females involved in sport. I think that was a very crucial point. I think that is integral to inclusion in sport for all females. If we can get the parents to support females playing sport, if we can find a way to show to the community that sport is a real career for females, then we can have more girls involved. I just really wanted to say that.
We totally appreciate that. In terms of the models, Ytannia, can you share some light? I mean, it might not be the first time that you've seen the models, but can you tell us where are we missing? What are we missing in the Caribbean when it comes to those two models?
We are missing the ability to adapt to what's happening in the world. We're missing the ability to understand that our system is broken, that our culture is perpetuated by those before us, and certainly those are coming after us. We're missing let's be honest, we are missing the honesty to call out persons who are not acting in a way that are safe for our athletes. And I say athletes because I'm both male and female, because I know we're talking about gender equality, inclusion, and inclusion has more than just male or female. It has to do with everyone. I think things happen in the region, and if you're being honest, it doesn't go anywhere. Like how the gymnastics, how it took them so long, and that's the US. Imagine in the Caribbean whereby things are said but hushed. So if you are a parent and you're hearing these things, you are less likely to allow your child, and furthermore your girl child, to participate in any sport. We have to think about the fact, and this is a real fact, the majority of females do not decide to participate in sport, and they drop out because they see no future in sport. No future in terms of remuneration, no future in terms of certainly educational sometimes, and I think Title IX helped change that somewhat. But abuse and harassment in sport is real, and like we've done in the Caribbean for generations, we are not talking about it. We are not bringing those who are the key what I want to say, the persons who are committing these crimes are never brought to light, plain and simple. So if that continues, then we're going to continue having a serious dearth of female athletes coming into the sports. And as Cleo said, I wouldn't blame a parent for not allowing their child to participate in the sport. And I was a manager, I was a coach, I was a player. And I've had to, as she said, I've gone to stadiums where I've had to change in somebody's car because the facilities are not up to standard. So unless we are willing to put policies, direct policies, and implement them, we will continue to struggle to keep young girls and in sport. It's plain and simple. That's it, really.
I'm going to ask a somewhat stupid question. But of the 4 barriers researched for the inclusion in sport that we have spoken to, physical, social, economic, and legal, Ytannia just mentioned legal, with one of it bringing persons to justice. Which of the 4 do you all consider the biggest barrier to inclusion and gender equality? Cleo?
I would have to say economic is a serious barrier. And track and field is different because track and field is an individual sport. So you can be a track and field athlete. A female track and field athlete actually is quite a valuable recruit because of Title IX to U.S. schools. So you can get athletic scholarships, you can go on and have a decent professional career. But then when you're talking about team sports, coming out of the Caribbean is quite different. Young women who may be interested in becoming, say, for example, a professional footballer or a professional netball player, it's quite a bit more challenging in terms of the support. Now you're looking, instead of support for one athlete, you're looking at the support for an entire team. And that's where a lot of the economics can hamper gender equality in sport.
Sorry, go ahead.
Very often, unless, and even when women teams win, we are unwilling to support them because we're saying, the narrative is people are not interested in female sports. But if we look at the dollars that we spend on advertising, promoting male sports, it's not equal. So, and then also the time frame in which we've had female participation in sport. So it's not really a balanced scale that we're forcing upon female athletes when it comes to the spending of dollars. And policies, once again, have to be put in place to make that more equitable.
Shakera, would you put culture as part of that barrier? And I'm going to be very loose here. You know, they say that a woman's worst enemy. Do you agree? Does that add to the topic of gender equality and inclusion in sports? Did I hit a nail there, ladies? Did I hit a nail there?
Hot one.
All right.
Bowl a hot one at you, Selman. Bowl a hot one.
So he bowl a boat to there just no way. Okay.
He went there.
Yeah, definitely, Jeff. Culture for sure is a big barrier. And I like the point that you made. I'm very happy you pointed out women are often women's own enemies. We tend to pull down each other. The first thing we hear in the Caribbean is, as long as someone is athletic, people tend to say they think they are men or they're too boyish, and it's something that's bothered me forever. You pass ladies in normal training gear, track pants and shirt, and the first thing that people say, and it's even more disappointing when you hear it from other women, is, oh, this person thinks they're a boy. That has absolutely nothing to do with being athletic. That's my biggest problem.
How does the media, before I even ask the next question, Ytannia, Cleo, you all want to talk about it?
Oh yeah,
You know
definitely.
what?
Come on.
Let's go. Let's go.
My sport was football, and I'm from Barbados. And someone would tell you the first thing, and I've had parents not allowing their daughters to come because they thought that their daughter would have turned lesbian. I'm using the word. I'm not even gonna hide it up. I've heard that from parents. And when we talk about inclusion, we only think about specific things. But what about the LGBT community? Are we inclusive as a body? Does your sexuality deter from you as a sports person? So remember, I keep telling you about the semantics. It drives me crazy because when we think about inclusion, we think about minorities. We just only think about women. But what about everything else? What about the spectrum? And definitely in sports, I see it in basketball, I see it in football. And don't talk about cricket. Cricket, come on, Selma, be honest. That's what people think. And I've suffered it. I mean, I manage a women's team. And I got the advances, I got all of that. But my sexuality should not be a question. My ability as an athlete, an administrator, and a coach should be the discussion, nothing else. And until we get there, we will always have this discussion, and it will always be a barrier for entry for athletes into any sport because they're going to think about it. Society and our culture pushes that on them. And we don't think it happens, but parents also project their fears onto their children, and that's what stops people from playing and participating in sports. There, I've said enough, pretty much.
You got me shivers when you mentioned the LGBTQ, and I just going to add the A. You give me shivers because my master's, our group project was as regards to, and I'm going to read it out, intersex and transgender professional athletes. And are international federations regulations discriminatory? It was very interesting to be able to look at transgender and intersex at the time when Caster Semenya and her case against the IAAF was prominent. Cleo, talk.
Oh, why you have to call me?
Talk.
You know, as a female athlete, it's tough. It's a tough situation. And being a track and field athlete as well, that's a tough circumstance. And I know a lot of folks disagree with me and my point of view. However, I'll use myself as an example. If someone trains in my sport, if a transgendered individual were to train in my sport, I know that it would be a real challenge for me. And in addition, biologically, it's just so difficult for me to compete against someone who has higher testosterone than myself, who has greater bone density, who has transitioned from male to female. It would just be really very difficult for me as an athlete. And, you know, I was present at Caster Semenya's very first senior international outing, and just the shock of the track and field community in the way she performed. It's as if we had no idea who she was, and then she was there and she was running against the best in the world, the best women in the world, and they look like primary school children. With all of that said, I am certainly an advocate for gender equality. I support the transgender community, but in sport, as a female athlete, it's really tough for us. It really, really is. And I don't know how we're going to treat with that issue. It's a very sensitive one. And to be very honest, you know, my most ridiculous self is I'm like, this could lead to the extinction of female throwing and the sport that I love because of the biological advantages for one being male. And in my sport, the advantages are to be bigger, stronger, taller. And we know that women, we are at a disadvantage to technically compared to men. So it's a really tough conversation to have, and I want to see where things go, but I've always supported. My best friend is gay. I don't know why I just said that. I just love her so much.
I'm loving this corner talk. This is corner talk. I'm loving it.
And I've been in circumstances where we're at track meets and she's discriminated against. I've been at circumstances where we're hopping on a train and someone will help me with my bag and they would look at her and they would let that train door close on her. And it's just a really difficult situation, but in sport, we have to include all women and look at, well, not just women, but, but look at performances. Let's focus on performances and let's have the conversation around the transgender community. But it's a tough one for us to have. It's tough.
I want to be able to take this time, given the year-long research, and we had a lot of key players on legal, medical, throughout the world speaking to us on this topic. And I want to start with, there's a difference between a transgender and an intersex athlete. Mm-hmm. And I want our viewers to take time to understand there's a difference. Also, based on our research, the following results occurred. 5 federations have regulations in place when it comes to transgender and intersex policies. 11 federations don't have regulations, but follow the 2015 IOC guidelines. 6 federations showed use of keywords, semantics, Ytannia. 18 federations have no regulations, nor shown use of keywords at all. And this is international sporting federations. Just to simplify our findings, a conflation of intersex and transgender, as I just explained, no standardization of terms, and a lack of knowledge. Very interesting. But in terms of recommendations, I would like Ytannia, from a Olympic committee standpoint, what recommendations would you introduce if it is you don't have one? And would you suggest to CANOC and to other Olympic federations and NGBs and NSOs as regards to policies to deal with inclusion of intersex, transgender, well, the whole LGBTQIA family?
You're from the same Caribbean as me, right? We still struggling for gender equity for women, and want to talk about it. Imagine you are going to send these people crazy. I'm being very realistic and honest, but I think it comes at a good time. It comes at a time where we're now realizing the importance of women in sport. It's coming at a time where many sports policies are still not implemented. So governments and NOCs and national federations can collectively sit down and start putting policies in place before it becomes too enshrined in us. Because culture is a serious, serious thing. To get over the mindsets of persons, that's a hard one. Like, I actually don't usually not have answers for stuff, but that's a really hard one. That conversation, because we're still having problems with parents and coaches talking about their daughters or even their sons. I mean, track and field is lit with it. Just be real and be honest. And so parents don't want that. So now you're going to tell parents about intersex and other letters. What do you think is going to happen? How is that going to impact? And I think the younger generation is more open to it, but there's a ceiling that they have to butt, and that's the older generations that set policies in place for them to elevate themselves. So,
Shakera, one of our recommendations was the division of categories based on 1, self-declared gender with no consumption of exogenous substances. 2, athlete sex determined solely by testosterone. 3, female sex category only. Yes, ladies are coming hard with bouncers. Shakera, of those 3, or you don't even have to pick the 3, you don't have to pick one of the 3. What would your suggestion be? Should we exclude them? Should we include them? Should they have their own category? Should it be just like Special Olympics?
This is a tough one. This is a tough one because yeah, this is a tough one because I completely understood Cleo's fear as it relates to competing against the transgender community. Obviously, we're already at a disadvantage as women, like Cleo pointed out. But a point to note is that, one, first of all, I think I like your second point about the testosterone level. And that actually goes hand in hand with something I read that Australia cricket is doing. So they're making sure that the testosterone level in the serum is actually below 10 nanomoles at least 12 months prior to competition. I think if we can ensure that, maybe that's the way to go. If not, perhaps I don't know, perhaps a special Olympics for them.
I think as female athletes, we need to have a category, and we need to demand a category. Now, I could advocate for a category, and then we have gender testing, and I find myself outside of the category, and that's a chance I'm willing to take. But at the end of the day, we need to have a line that says this is where female is, and this is where you're able to compete at the international level. This is the line. And we have to be very clear about that, because with the Caster Semenya case, we knew that she was way above other females. And I've personally met Caster. She's a lovely young lady, but as a female athlete, it's not good enough to say, well, she was born with elevated testosterone. If she's born with elevated testosterone, then I should be able to elevate my testosterone to where she is. We need to, I don't want to. But if that's where we're going to place the cat, if she's going to compete in the female category, you can't say to me, well, you have to stay with your lady testosterone.
But I'm excited here. Listen. So let me ask you this question. Let me throw this back at you. Don't mean to be rude, humbly.
We're all friends, yeah.
But in law, there's something called act of God.
I wanted to ask, wouldn't it be discriminatory for us to then tell her her God-given levels are not right for our games?
Act of God, exactly.
Is God the referee? Is God the referee?
Yeah, I think that's different.
And that's why one of the findings literally was knowledge, because there's a transgender and intersex is two different things.
But in addition, we cannot tell where the act of God starts and where other stuff, where God stops and where other stuff begins. We can't tell that. And I'm coming from the point of view of a female athlete who has competed against many female athletes who intensify their testosterone. And I have to listen, for the 2004 Olympic Games, we don't have a bronze medalist in the women's shot put. Why? Because they were just kicking people out left and right.
Wow.
And then the IOC decides not to award a medal.
Yeah.
A whole entire Olympic medal. They could not award the medal because of people. So for folks who say elevated testosterone is no big deal, I'm like, come on, let's be real. Let us be real.
So here's my question.
We have to have an area. We have to female ends.
Yeah.
So your entry into an event, to an Olympic event or any event, would be your gender, your qualification standards, and then your testosterone level.
No. My testosterone level is directly linked with my gender.
Is it really?
Yes.
Really?
It is linked with, because as a female, when we look at, we have to put the line somewhere, and it's hard to find a place to put the line, but the line has to go somewhere. We have to say, okay, this category, or else it's just open. And then if we decide to do that, that's what it is. But you cannot say to me, as a female athlete with my little bit of natural testosterone, and I'm struggling to lift 100K in the gym, and here walks in this girl and she's lifted 200K like it's nothing.
What about sex doping, Ytannia? Let's look at that aspect of sex doping, and I don't want us to stay too long on this because yes, it all ties into gender equality, very much so.
And
Sex
inclusion
doping,
shouldn't
and
we be
inclusion.
inclusive of people?
Women have to stand up for women's sport. I'm
So
sorry. We
what
have to
about
stand up for our sport, for our
agreed.
event.
So what about sex doping and the creation of a database, local, regional, and international, as regards to these athletes? Do you agree with such? Do you agree that we're supposed to have mechanisms, methodologies to deal with sex doping, and also the creation of databases to deal with this community of athletes?
If you're talking about athletes, you have to protect the athletes, right? 100% Cleo, don't get me wrong. I totally agree with that. But then if you're talking inclusion and then you're telling me that I have to list all these different things, are you really being inclusive?
I'm talking about inclusion. I'm not talking about the wild, wild west. You know, listen, in my event, we have had women who transitioned after. This is you've touched my sore spot. Good. Because my event is completely strength based.
Yes, 100%.
And you know, the work that I had to put in to get to where I was, I felt like I should have to compete against women. And to go to compete against athletes who have doped, and
it's unfair.
Listen, it's not unfair. It is demoralizing. Okay, and I'm a very moralized person.
So, ladies, just for the sake of our viewers, I want to put this graphic up because a lot of persons, especially the young persons who we want to look at this, who may not know the difference between gender and sex. This is very important. Gender is the identity and expression of self. Sex is the binary approach, reproductive organs. I want our viewers to please, when it says we see these words being thrown at us, please note well and why. Again, gender, identity and expression of self. Sex, binary approach, reproductive organs. They are not the same. With that being said, let's just take a quick pause, a quick break. I hope it's a dancing break as well because we need to get a little jiggy. You know, you're watching Futsal 868 Corner Talks, episode 16, Gender Equality and Inclusion in Sport. We'll be right back.
Jerusalem, ikayalami, ilonoloze, uhambe nami, zungangishilana, dawo yami, ayikholana, buso wami, awukholana, ilondoloze.
So we are back to overtime, extra time, in episode 16 of Futsal 868 Corner Talks. And before we were speaking as regards to gender equality and inclusion when it comes to the transgender and intersex athletes, which, as Cleo says, touch a sore spot. And it has also made me recognize, and I just messaged my team quickly, I think that we need to do an episode on this. Because I really want to bring in some of my colleagues who have done research along this and some of the global leaders in this discussion because we really need to educate our persons. Before we move on, the question I have to ask is, what is the media's role when it comes to this topic? I want to take the time to thank Marsha Boyce for putting me on to Ytannia, my linky, my Bayesian linky. Hi, Marsha. What is again, repeating myself, ladies, what is the media doing? That one-eye monster called television. Anyone?
Whew, gosh, so much.
I have to say, throughout my career, the media has been kind to me in Trinidad and Tobago. I get coverage, but I get questions like, "Why are you in such a manly sport? Why this non-traditional sport?" And I'm like, "Because I'm good at it, you know."
Yes.
Wow.
So that's tough, and perhaps the media can be more supportive of other females in sport in terms of coverage and support, but and then sensitivity to the questions, you know, when you're gonna have a baby, when you know, like, come on guys, let's
Like, why? Like,
yeah.
if you, it's
They
the
don't ask men
disparity
that.
is there. Yeah, don't why? Did you do not ask a man when he's gonna have another outside woman or another child? Why start with
Exactly.
why I'm gonna have a child? Why?
Let me tell
Tell
you
me.
a quick story. My first Olympics, I was a finalist, and I was proposed to on the same day, and it became a big story that ran even in Baltimore. And my mother was pissed, and I was like, "What is wrong with this lady?" And she said, "Because it was your day." She was mad at the person who proposed, and she was mad that became the story, because she
And not
said,
yours.
"You're the first woman to be an Olympic finalist for Trinidad and Tobago
And
in
that
this
should have been the
sport."
story.
And that should have been enough to be the story. It shouldn't have been
Yeah.
romanticized with a proposal.
It never
Agreed.
is.
Agreed.
But that's
Yeah.
where we kind of have to move from awareness to action. Now we know it is wrong, but still we continue to do it. And I'm going to throw it at you, John. Like something you said, you are here with these beautiful women. As a journalist, if you had 3 men here, you would not say we are here with these 3 handsome men.
Guys.
I mean, and it's working your psyche.
No, you never know. I am sure about myself. I am sure about myself. And that's why it's called Corner Talks, because you're on the block line having a corner talk with your brethren or your sister. You know, there's a reason why we call it Corner Talks. But I hear your point. Your point is clear. Even as a matter of reviewing our strategic plan, we have a pillar that is called female inclusivity. And so people might say, why do you all even have just one pillar for it? Because we need to do more for our females, as well as a man. We really and truly, please, we not go down the Me Too movement, because at the same time, I want to acknowledge my strong, beautiful Black woman, and I'm saying it. It's recorded. I'm saying it. I need to acknowledge my strong, beautiful Black woman, because at the same point, we as men have a responsibility to you all.
You're our allies. You have to be our allies.
And he's an ally. He's an ally.
We have to walk hand in hand.
It's the biases of men who are not our allies. You're an ally, and we can let that pass. We're like, okay, you compliment us, and I hope you're not offended. But it's just I think it was an example of
it wasn't offensive.
It wasn't offensive. No. An inherent bias in our community, and you're our ally. So then imagine men who are not our allies, who are willing to say to a female athlete, "She getting fat, it's time to run, and she get old, and time to," you're an ally.
So right, Cleo. Too often the references to our age, or our sex, or some physical image, as opposed to the performance. Yeah, as opposed to the performance, as opposed to the fact that we are athletes. And when they're talking about men, they speak to the performance each and every time first. Yeah. So that's the problem. That's the biggest problem when it comes to media coverage. It's the biggest problem, but another problem is also the quality of the coverage when it relates to female sports. The quality and the quantity of the coverage. There's not enough. It's improving, but there still isn't enough. I think more can be done.
Yeah. We kind of have to look for policies.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we kind of have to look for ways to improve the image of women's sport. And I keep saying policy because if we don't deliberately put things in place, it will continue as is. If we don't deliberately say that we have to look for crossovers and promotional opportunities with men's sports and women's sports, if we don't take our female athletes and use them to promote the sport, and then take our young daughters and our young sons to see females participating in sport, then we aren't going to change anything. We will still be having this conversation 10 years from now.
I think what is also helping though is the increasing number of female sport broadcasters we are seeing.
Yes.
We have a number of broadcasters in cricket, and we also have, I think, Alexis Nunes. I think her role is very important at ESPN, and that can lead the way for women.
Yeah,
I don't know about you and you all in Barbados. I know about Marsha. I know about my former colleague at University of West Indies. I forgot her name. Her name.
Let me throw a statistic to you. I know we always talk about represented, but in Barbados, our media has a lot of female journalists, reporters, broadcasters. I wouldn't say it's necessarily yes, and I want to applaud our team because we have we have a lot. We have in Nation News, we have female reporters. We have Rhea Goodman, even Barbados Today, Marissa Lindsay, and she does football. Yep. We have broadcasters, and for Sports Journalists Day, we shouted out our sports broadcasters, and we had at least 6 or 7 in Barbados. So
big up Miss Burke.
You can't big up Miss Burke, like you cannot. So I don't know if it was a deliberate policy or it was the people who went before us or our male allies in the media that pulled them along. But we have, I think, fair representation in the media in Barbados. Somebody might shoot me in my foot, but compared to other countries that I've been in, I think we're doing good. And I can't say it was because of any particular policy. What I can say is our male journalists are open to bring in our female journalists along with them. But I'm sure the people in the journalistic community could speak to that more. But from the outside looking in, I think we have pretty good representation in Barbados.
Cleo, what's the case in Trinidad and Tobago? Being on the other side of the mic, were you interviewed by any woman at all?
I would say yes. I've been interviewed by Rachel, I can't remember her last name right now, by Franca Phillips, who worked with the BBC at one point in time. Miss Mohammed, who covers cricket now. Yes. Can't remember her first name. And also, but you see, there's a big mix in terms of the sort of lifestyle journalist and the sport journalist in my career, and that's fine. I think that female interest in sport journalists will go hand in hand with female participation. It's kind of a subcategory. So then as we see female sport grows, we'll have more women interested in sport, in the media and journalism surrounding sport.
Women leadership and management. Yes, Ytannia, I see you smiling. I don't even need to ask you a question.
All my sore spots today, all of them.
Oh, every last one?
Every
last one. Oh, gosh. Listen. How can we talk about gender equality and inclusion if we don't talk about leadership? If women are placed in decision makers, I don't think we should be invited to the party and not allowed a seat at the table. And that has been happening before. And I think the IOC set their quotas and it has helped. And years down now, we have competent leaders. And here's another thing about changing our mindset. My president always says this. She always tells me, Ytannia, I'm not a female president of the Olympic Association. I am the president. And when we stop having to label your sex in your title, then we really think about your competence as a leader. I dream of a day for my daughters when I no longer have to say the first female this. I dream of that. And we're still seeing it, the first female in this, the first female in that. The conversation is working, we've come a long way, but I want to get to where I don't have to say the first female, where it's the norm and not the exception.
So how does education play in that role? Shakera and Cleopatra, part of the FIFA CIES, FIFA CIES Postgraduate Diploma in Sports Management. How does education play in this? When it speaks to women leadership and management?
Well, in my class, I was one of, I think, four women in our class out of maybe 15. However, Our program was managed by Shalon Cabrales and Calicia Gregor. So we had women managing the program, but not so many students involved. And it's tough, especially in sport as a female administrator, because you're sort of given the position as the one lady on the team, or we need to have one female, and you're not necessarily seen as a valuable asset to the team. You're seen as sort of, okay, let's check this box. And we need to move away from that concept and understand that we have good administrators in these West Indies of ours. And we need to give them the opportunity. We've never had, as far as I know, a female leader of the NAAAs, a female president of the NAAAs, and we've never had a female president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee. So these are things, these are landmarks that we need to look forward to.
But we must give credit to Mr. Brian Lewis for his stance. I use the word stance that he has been doing so far as regards to the TTOC. And I will also push that as well to, it's possible that if a woman was leading the TTFA, the Trinidad Tobago Football Association, things wouldn't happen the way it's happening right now. Yes, I said it. Right here on Futsal 868.
And I have to say, one of our best managers is, of course, Miss Annette Nutt in Trinidad and Tobago. She was the manager of our of my third Olympic team, and it was just, she created a different sort of atmosphere and environment, and the team performed really well. So we have to see the value in diversity and understand what female administrators can bring to the table in terms of the support for athletes.
I love what you said about diversity, because women's participation in sports, the strategy has to diversify our leadership. And the statistics speak for themselves. If you think about it, Ernst & Young, when they did this study, like 94% of the women who play sports end up in leadership positions. And we found that girls, and we talk about grassroots and involved in the family, girls who play sports in school tend to do better academically, resort to less drugs, and have better health than those who actually don't. So the statistics speak for themselves. Why do we keep dancing around, putting policies in place to make it continually happen for our young girls? It's frustrating, actually, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, this goes back to what I started with, Jeff. One of my first points was about allocating females into positions, and not just to help your code, improve your quota system. Believing and accepting that they can do the job, accepting recognizing their value, like Cleo said.
Ladies, we are going to overtime, and allow 10 minutes. I'm begging for 10 more minutes, right? We're going to take a short break because of the COVID-19 happening again. It was the second wave in Trinidad and Tobago. Our team decided to put together something to be able to, please talk to our people. And after this break, we're going to speak to recommendations as regards to our topic. We will be right back. And yes, welcome back to 16th episode of Futsal 868 Corner Talks, where we speak to gender equality and inclusion in sport. What a beautiful Corner Talks today was. Ladies, thank you very much. To a point whereby I would like to do it again, if you all will have us.
We should.
We should.
Yeah.
This segment is going to be as regards to suggestions, recommendations, and I'm going to throw up, as we did last week, something from the IOC. And they have the following recommendations. The leader on the leadership of gender equality, allocating funds specifically for sportswomen and employing funding as an incentive for organizations to implement gender equality, sustain or in some cases introduce an inclusive organizational culture, ensure that women who are invited in senior governance positions are assigned roles of influence with decision-making responsibilities, use statutes, policies, and the electoral process to entrench gender equality in the organization. 6, monitor progress, measure, and evaluate outcomes and instill accountability. 6 recommendations from the IOC are seen as the epitome of sports management globally. Do you all agree? Do you all want something taken out? Do you all want something added?
Those recommendations would have came out at the Gender Equality Review, which are the 25 recommendations which were broken out. They're fine. They're recommendations. But I think we need to look at real world examples and that suit our culture here. And we got to look, our ideas need to take a multi-pronged approach. Something as simple as, I'm going to list my 5 top. Look for crossovers and promotional opportunities with men's sports. No way they themselves should be sponsoring West Indies cricket and not the women. Like, who brokered that deal? Talk to me. It is wrong. So you have to look for those. And when you're negotiating, you don't negotiate for the men's team. You negotiate for the West Indies cricket team or the football team across the board. We need to continually get our star athletes involved. Or marketing, and right now you and I and everybody know today's social media centric landscape lends to this. We do not have to wait for mainstream TV to do ads. Our federations or NOCs need to cherry pick and groom our female athletes and put them in a positive light. We need to apply for targeted funding. It goes hand in hand with sponsorship. Don't have sponsorship only for the male team. Involve the women's team in your negotiation as well. Representation is key. Take young girls to watch sports and women's sports. Right now, Serena Williams and her daughter is a beautiful example of showing young women or women with their children, and you can still be an athlete after. We need to work with our most passionate fans because, as Cleo had rightfully said, without the fans, nothing happens. And I know we talk about we don't have fans, but people watch good sports and female athletes are excellent at what they do. And if we show it more people will watch it. Real world solutions is what we need.
Ytannia, you have mom. Thank you very much for that contribution. Really appreciate it. We have a little marketing to do with that because definitely we're going to put it out. We have to put it out. Cleo, Shakera, talk to me.
I'll jump in here. I totally agree with what Ytannia said. Ytannia has been asking for policies from the start of this conversation, and those are the things that we need to focus on. If we can get policies in place I know we don't have the same resources that Australia has, but if we can utilize the resources we have to ensure that equality, that equity, then we will go a long way. If we can get into the communities and show that sport is a viable career, then we can move forward. And most importantly, I think we are still a very backward and ignorant society here in the Caribbean. And if we need to educate the Caribbean, we need to educate the people. Let them see how important sport is for this equality, for this gender equality. We need to get into the communities. And yeah, we really need to get into the communities and I don't know, teach them, have some more open and honest conversations. Those uncomfortable conversations, we need to start having them. And not just have those conversations, have them and then take action. I think those are the only way forward.
Cleo?
I'm going to just piggyback on what Ytannia and Shakera are saying. And I'm actually going to challenge the futsal community of Trinidad and Tobago to promote and have mixed gender futsal for our kids, because we know that children up until I think the age of 10, they can participate in mixed gender sport. And futsal is a great opportunity to develop skills, all the skills that we get from sport, be it being a team player, understanding losing, failure, and winning, and understanding just body mechanics. So I'm going to challenge Jeffrey and you guys at Futsal868 to really put something in place that will support gender equality in this country by developing mixed gender Pee-wee futsal.
I take in that.
Yes.
I take in that.
Is that invitation for another one still open? Another conversation?
Yes. But
I think it would be a beautiful thing for us once the virus has passed for us to do that.
I also taken also pushing out this to you all. I'm looking for positive role models for our young people. And I would like you all to be ambassadors to the Futsal868 movement. You don't have to answer now, but
we inside. Do you it's unanimous. It's unanimous.
Our tagline says stronger together, and it's very important that we recognize that we cannot operate in silo, and it's something that I see has been happening as regards to sporting organizations locally and regionally. We operate in silo, even when it comes to our service providers, physiotherapists, sports scientists. Everybody operates in silo because everybody has egos, and I hate it. And I am not going to put water in my mouth to please anybody. Right? So I want to say at this point in time, we understand that gender equality and inclusion is a complex, multifaceted, and multi-level phenomenon that meets society in all its sectoral linkages from the global to the local. Today's episode was just to try to speak to, in a small manner, to the many topics or issues that surrounds all of these stakeholders in sports as regards to this. And for that, we want to say thank you very much to Ms. Cleopatra Borel, 4-time Olympian, Ytannia Wiggins, Chair of the Women in Sports Commission, and my sister, Sally, professional cricketer at the Women's West Indies cricket team. Thank you very much, ladies, for being a part of this program. And I want to say God's richest blessings to you and your families. Please be safe in this weird time. But in God we trust, in God we believe. And again, I want to say thank you very much to all our viewers, to have a safe and blessed and productive week. God richest blessings. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Bye. Nice.
Nice to meet you all.